want to ask you a question. How many of you have experienced failure in the past week in some form or fashion? Okay. Little failure, big failure. How many was a little failure? Yeah, I don't know. That's to the beholder. How many it was a big failure? Okay, a few big failures. Okay. You know, we're all accustomed to failure. To be human is to err is a phrase, right? To be human also is to experience failure. I don't believe anyone has ever has not experienced failure, save maybe Jesus Christ, all right? To get into this morning, I just was, kind of thinking of some of my own personal failures over the years, and I want you to be thinking for a minute of some of your failures, because we're going to talk about that today. But, it doesn't take me long. I can just start going down a list of them. I remember one of my early failures was that as a kid, I was playing with a candle in the living room. And my mom told me, now put that up on a table or something like that, but I was down on the carpet having fun, and I had a cup, and I like to stick it over the flame and pull it back and stick it over the flame. Well, as you can imagine, it caught fire, right? So instead of freaking out, I gently just walked into the kitchen where my mom was and said, "Mom, can I have a glass of water?" And she gives me a glass of water, and I walk out with it, and she's going, "That's odd. He never comes in and asks for a glass of water." And she comes in, and there's the carpet's on fire. That's a failure. Then there was the time when I got my first car, and I was super excited about it, and it got dirty. And for the first time, I get to experience taking my own car to a car wash, run it through, and do the thing, and that feels really cool when you haven't done that before. After you've done it a few times, you don't want to do it anymore, because I never wash my car anymore. I just wait for the rain to do it for me, okay? That's what I do. But here I am. I run it through the car wash, and I noticed my car's a little dirty, and I said, man, I'm going to go get something. They got those little machines, and I go over there, and I put some money in it, and I get a Brillo pad. And I come over, and I'm going to clean all the dirt off my car, and did not realize, naivety, did not realize that that's for the tires. Get the tar off the tires. Man, I did my car so good. Washed it, dried it, pulled out, did the chamois thing and everything. I'm going, what is going on here? Compound just didn't do it. There were so many little circles just in the paint of my car. That's a failure, okay? There was a time me and a friend were playing in the woods, and we were just making a little campfire, and got out of control. And it got big and bigger, and we couldn't get it out. And the next thing you know, there was a team of Little League baseball players across the road playing. They saw the fire going, and we hooked it. And then we came back around and watched peeking from the woods, and they're trying to put it out. It's just growing. And finally, here comes the fire truck to put that thing out. That's a failure. I could keep going. You've got some like that. I didn't have anything else to do, but stuff like that. Oh, I got plenty of those. No, I better not go there. We have those kind of we have those kind of failures, don't we, in life? Many of them. And then we have sometimes spiritual failures. And maybe a failure with God. Over the course of the years, especially in years that I've been in ministry, I've had probably at least 3. I've had plenty of small failures, many. last week's sermon. That was a failure. No, I've had plenty of failures, small ones, spiritually speaking. But I've also had some big ones. And 3 come to mind as I get in this today. And really the first one was what I thought was a failure from God. I thought it was God's failure. That was 3 years into starting the church. And I wanted to build a church on prayer. And we were praying. And I believe that if we were the praying church, that God would not deny us people coming into the kingdom, people getting saved. And we were on the effort side of that too, being evangelistic, and it didn't happen. And I was disappointed with God. God, I read in your word what it says about prayer. If we're out preaching the gospel and doing all this stuff, where are the souls coming into the kingdom? And it didn't happen. But moved past that, and God brought some victory. Second one was when I turned 43. And I hit a wall. People probably call it a midlife crisis. I don't call it a midlife crisis because I didn't go out and try to get a red Corvette and do all those kind of crazy things. What that was for me was kind of a midlife reassessment. And I'm not going to preach that to you because I've preached on that sometime in the last number of years. But during that time, I faced, and it was a God thing, I faced what I would consider to be a time where God was showing me my failings before him. I realized how I had not lived up to the full potential of what he had called me to as a Christian. And I wrestled with what I considered to be where I had failed as a husband, and where I had failed as a father, and where I had failed as a pastor. And this was about a 10-month process where during that time, all I could do was just get up each day and weep and pray. That's all I could do. I just didn't feel like I could hardly function because and I see now that God was taking me through a season where he was showing me how much he loves me, and that it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, but nonetheless, there were things that he wanted to redeem. He wanted to take things to a whole nother level. And then there was the season that some of you are familiar with that goes back 3, 4, 5 years ago, somewhere in there, where I think as a church we hit the wall. And I didn't know how to lead through that season. And if anything, just to keep it sweet and short and move on, I think I tried to lead the church one way, and the church didn't want to go that way. And then out of fear, I started trying to lead as I thought people wanted, and I became what I think the Bible classically calls a people pleaser. And I went through a season of that, and I think it had ill effects upon it. It was a failure of leadership. One of the things that I want to tell you is out of every one of those failures, God did a redemptive work and does redemptive work. And I want us to look this morning. I've titled this, When We Fail God. And I'd like to ask you to take a moment and pray and ask God just to speak to your own heart. Is there something you've been carrying for a long time in terms of your relationship with God that you feel you've failed him in? Maybe time and time and time again. You feel like you're getting no traction in that, and so you want to give up, or you feel you're unworthy, or you feel like God can't love you anymore because you made that big mistake in your life. Whatever that thing is, as God puts that on your heart, I want you to have that in your mind's eye as we go through this morning. Pray with me. Father, this morning we ask that you show us the depth of your love towards us. And Lord, that this morning that we can take any failure and lay it before your feet. And so, Father, every one of us in this room right now, maybe we didn't come in here this morning, Lord, ready to address failings in our lives. But Lord, we know that you do, and that you want to bring successes and victories. That you want to redeem our lives. So Lord, I pray that you speak to our hearts today. You bring freedom. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. I want us to follow the storyline of two men who walked with Jesus, but failed him greatly in the time that you would expect them to be soaring. Those two people are Peter, the apostle, and Judas. And I just want to run through a few things to just kind of so that you look at the backdrop of their story. And I'll give you some of these verses, but I really want to get through that quickly and get towards the end where I think we learn some things. But let me just start with Peter and Judas. They were both called to follow Jesus. Jesus picked them out of the masses, and he said, you follow me, you follow me. Will you follow me? Come follow me. And these men did that. You know the story of Peter. Peter's a fisherman, right? And he's out there fishing one day, out on his boat, and he's out there with the sons of Zebedee. You know who they are. They were friends of Peter's. They were all, and Andrew, all these people, a lot of them were fishermen. So they're out there fishing one day, and Jesus comes by, and he says, hey, I want to speak to the crowds on the bank, so let me get in your boat and push out to shore. Well, they do that. While they're doing that, Peter's still paying very little mind to Jesus. He's still trying to fish. And Jesus finishes up and says, you had any luck? No. He goes, throw the nets on the other side. And when he did, he catches so many fish that he doesn't, they can't contain it. The boats are about to sink. And Peter looks at Jesus and he says, go away from me, leave me, Lord. He says, Lord, I'm a sinful man. I'm not worthy to be around you. He knew he had come close to someone, something that this is just not, you've got the wrong person, Jesus. You don't understand. And Jesus says, I'm going to make you a fisher of men if you'll follow me. You can keep fishing for fish if you want to. It is so much more exciting to fish for men, for people, souls. So we have that little encounter, and it's interesting here too. John, so you'll find these, by the way, in Mathew 4 and Luke 5, but in John chapter 1, it throws a little extra thing in there that I just want to mention it for now. It becomes important in a little bit. But that is that in that very occasion, Jesus changes Peter's name. Actually, it was Simon when he met him, and he changes it to Peter. And you got to have some translations too, because it was Cephas in one translation, but it was Peter. Peter is the name that he gave him. And there's a reason for that, and we'll come back to it in a moment. So, first of all, both Peter, you don't really hear about Judas being called to follow Jesus. You hear a whole lot more about Peter. But Judas is there. He's in the backdrop. And Judas makes the final cut, by the way. So, in I guess it's Luke chapter 6, the story moves on, and now Jesus is amassing many, many disciples, many followers after Jesus. And one night he goes away to pray through the night. And when he comes back the next morning, he has selected 12 men out of his followers, out of his disciples, to become what he called apostles. Now, by the way, an apostle, it simply means sent one who has been sent for a very, very important purpose. Jesus himself was called an apostle in the Bible. The Father sent the Son into the world on mission. And now Jesus has been praying all night long, and he's saying, Father, is it, I can't think of any other names than just the, James, yeah. Is it James? Is it, yeah. Is it Gertrude? Is it, who is it going to be? And when he gets done, it's the 12 that you know. And Judas makes the cut. He's in there. He's one of the 12. Okay, the story moves along a little bit more, and we start seeing a little bit of Peter's personality emerge. And so in Mathew chapter 14, we have the encounter where Jesus is walking on the water, and they're out there in a boat, and they're going, what? What is Jesus? It's you. You're walking on the water. And for just a moment, Peter goes, Lord, bid me to come to you, to walk out on this water. And he tells him, come on. Come on, get out of the boat and come on. You just right over here, walk. We'll beat the rest of the disciples across the shore and get to the. So he starts walking out there. The storm rises. I wonder who did that, by the way. Father, make the winds blow a little, whatever, just to make it exciting. We're going to test his faith a little bit more. When it's all calm and still, and get out there and walk on it. It's like, it's placid. But when the waves start doing this, and then they start doing that, and the winds are whipping and back and forth, it gets a little scary, and his faith just seemed to fault there. And he cries out, Lord, save me. He reaches his hand, and instantly everything stops. I better put you back in the boat, young man. Actually, they were at the shore. I forget now. Never mind. So you start seeing his personality come out. He's the one we're going to find out is the man with the foot-shaped mouth. Just always, Lord, I will be the one. Yes, Lord, we can do it. He was always the one that boldly spoke up in a lot of situations. Then we come along to Mathew chapter 16. Key moment, Mathew 16. And you can read it if you want to, and I'll just kind of tell you the story. So Jesus, one day, he's walking with his apostles. He's walking with these 12. And he asks them, he says, who do people say that I am? And he said, oh, well, Lord, the people are saying that maybe you're Elijah, or one of the prophets, or, something like that. And he says, yeah, but who do you say that I am? Oh, and Peter, he's the one that boldly speaks up, right? Lord, you are the Christ, meaning you're the Messiah. You're the Savior. You're the one we've been expecting all along. You're here to save your people. They didn't understand fully what salvation was at that moment, but we know that you are the Christ. And Jesus says these profound words to him. He says, flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven. Now, it's interesting because he goes on to say, and I say to you, first of all, he says, I better read it. I'm going to get it all out of whack. Okay. He says, verse 18, and I say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. Now, here's the play on words that's going on. And you've probably heard this somewhere along the way. But Peter means stone or a small rock. And so he is saying, Peter, this revelation that you have received from God that I am the Messiah, upon that revelation, upon that rock, that is a foundation, I'm going to place another little stone on top of that one, and that's you. And so we have at this moment, we have the revelation of who Jesus is and the foundation for the church. But Peter, you're going to play a very significant role. So he's been called, think about it, he's been called to be a disciple, to follow Jesus. Then he's been called to be one of the 12, to be an apostle sent into the world. And now he's been called to a very specific place in the founding of the church. And here we get a little insight into it. Verse 19, he says, and I will give you the keys of the kingdom. I will give you the keys of the kingdom. What in the world is he talking about? I'm going to tell you, my interpretation is he is showing him the purpose of the mission for which Jesus came down here. I'm going to build my church, and that church is going to further the kingdom of my Father. It's going to be about souls. It's going to be about people coming to faith in Jesus Christ. And he's going to play a significant role. And you see that role played out in the book of Acts. And that's all I'm going to say about it right now, okay? Because we need to move on. So, you've got that going on. And I'm just wanting you to see how God has been preparing Peter during this time. Peter has walked with him for 3 years, a little over 3 years. And then he gets to be one of the ones that gets to go with him with John and James and Peter all get to go with him one time where they get away from the rest of the apostles and they get to see Jesus transfigured or metamorphosized right before their eyes. It's as though the transfiguration, to me, to keep it real simple, is almost his divinity shining through his humanity. It's like, I want you to see who I really, really am. You say I'm the Christ, that is true. But even the Old Testament, as they thought of who the Messiah would be or the Christ would be, didn't necessarily think that person was divine, was God. They thought it was one sent by God. And that is true. But now we're finding out, hey, I want you to really see who I am. And so it's kind of cool when you read this in Matthew 17, it says that his garments were as white as light. White as light. And I understand that white light is a spectrum of colors. You can't see the colors, but it's white as light. Okay, Mark 9 says this, that his garments were so white. I love this. I don't know why I love this. If you don't love it, there's something wrong with you. Okay, Mark 9:3 says this, his garments were so white as no launderer on earth can whiten them. I don't, it's like, what is that in there for? A launderer here on earth couldn't make it any whiter. I mean, couldn't make it as white as it was. You know, and I'm like, no launderer here on earth, maybe a launderer in heaven. You know, I don't know, but I forget it. I like it. So let's move on. That's just a little bit of a perspective that you see what God is doing when he calls somebody. But now I want us to look at both of these men. We just got a little bit of Judas. He's always in the backdrop. He's there. He's among them. But you see a lot about Peter, and that's why we looked at his life a little bit. But now I want us to look at their failures. So, the first one let's look at Judas. If you'll turn with me to Luke 22. Luke 22, 1 through 6 says this. Now the feast of unleavened bread, which is called the Passover, was approaching. So they're about to have the Passover where they were going to celebrate the Lord's Supper before he went to the cross. Verse 2 says, the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how they might put Jesus to death, for they were afraid of the people. And Satan, look at this, Satan entered into Judas, who was called Iscariot, belonging to the number of the 12. And he went away and discussed with the chief priests and officers how he might betray him to them. And they were glad and agreed to give him money. And he consented, and he began seeking a good opportunity to betray him to them, to betray him to them apart from the multitude. So he was looking for the right occasion, the right opportunity to do this. Now, there's two theories on why Judas did this, and I'm not going to go into either one of them. Okay? But what I want you to know is don't overlook it at Judas as like, well, he was just evil incarnate or something. Jesus does say it would have been better he said, the Son of God is going to go as it has been determined, but woe to the man through whom that comes through. I didn't say that right, did I? But you get the point, I think. I could read these verses, but I just kind of want to talk through the story just a little bit. Mark 14 also tells us that as Jesus was now, this is past this moment, Judas has already been strategizing how he can do this. And now he's back with the 12, and they're with Jesus, and Jesus is having this supper, this Last Supper with them. In fact, can we just turn to John 13 right quick? John 13. Verse 21 in John 13, it says, Truly, truly, I say to you that one of you will betray me. Now, if you read this in Mark chapter 14 and a little bit further down here in John 13, same story, a little bit different details. One of the things that all of the disciples were, it says they were grieved. Oh no, surely not. We're your 12. And so they were all going, it's not me, is it, Lord? And another one, not me, Lord. It's not me, is it? They were all grieved and worried and out of sorts over this. If it was somebody that was super evil, they'd probably all be looking down at the end of the table. We all know who it is, don't we? You know, but it was not that obvious. I want you to know that in chapter 13, before he tells them that one of you will betray me, I want you to know what he has done to all 12, including Judas. He has served him the Lord's Supper. So you cannot, if you do not eat the bread and take the cup, then you have no part in me. He offered this to Judas. Judas had it. Next, he removed whatever he was wearing and put a towel around him and knelt at the feet of every one of his apostles and washed their feet, including Judas's. Jesus loved Judas. He chose him 3 years earlier to be one of his disciples and then to be an apostle. Training him, equipping him for this time. I don't know if even at this moment he's offering him a tea leaf, an olive branch. Judas, come back. Jesus was going to go regardless of whether Judas did this or not. That part was predestined, that Jesus was sent. He was an apostle sent of the Father to die for the sins of the whole human race. It didn't have to have a betrayer. How many times did they try to kill Jesus before he even got there? This was going to happen. John 18:6, we see the story unfold where Judas comes, he kisses the cheek of Jesus. The soldiers come and take him and they say, "Who are you?" "I'm Jesus." And it's kind of interesting to me that they all fall backwards and fall flat on their backs. Just hearing that, "I'm Jesus." Boom. That's like, they didn't know what they were doing either. But finally, he goes away with them. That's a failure in Judas's life. Let's look at Peter right quick. Back to Luke 22, verse 31. This is right after the Lord's Supper also, but we only find it here in Luke. Jesus says this, "Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat, to take you out." That's kind of odd, isn't it? Satan has demanded permission. That's kind of a contradiction, isn't it? It's either a demand or you have been granted permission. I demand permission. But this is what Satan has done. He's commanded permission, and this is what he says. "But I've prayed for you, Peter, that your faith may not fail." Now, let me tell you, his faith failed. And Jesus knows that even though he's prayed that his faith will not fail, that it's about to fail. "I have prayed for you, even though Satan has commanded or demanded permission to sift you like wheat. I've prayed for you that your faith may not fail, and you, when once you have turned again, strengthen your brothers." So we see that Jesus is already saying, "I prayed that your faith would not fail," but it's implied in this statement that it's about to fail. But it's also saying, in my prayer, that I believe you're going to turn back. You're going to come back. Verse 33, "And he said to him," this is Peter saying to Jesus, "Lord, with you I'm ready to go both to prison and to death." He said, "Oh, Peter, the cock will not crow today until you've denied me 3 times that you even know me." What? Jesus has already predicted that one of his apostles is going to betray him, and now he's predicting that another one's going to deny him. Mark 14. Actually, Luke 13:36. John 13 tells us in this same occasion, Peter tells him, "I will lay down my life for you, Jesus." Pretty bold statement in this moment. But let's look at Mark 14. Mark 14, 26 through 31 says this. This is still, they've just done the Lord's Supper. They've celebrated the Passover. All these things have happened. In verse 26, they sang a hymn. They sang a hymn. And after they were done singing, Jesus says this to his whole band, his leaders, his apostles, his sent ones. You will all fall away because it is written, I will strike down the shepherd and the sheep shall be scattered. Goes back and finds a prophecy from Zechariah that when the shepherd is struck, the sheep will scatter. And he's now predicting all of you are going to fall away. In verse 28, but after I've been raised, I will go before you to Galilee. But here's Peter. I want you to see Peter. Notice the uniqueness of Peter. Peter said to him, even though all may fall away, yet I will not. I will never do this, Jesus. And Jesus says to him, truly I say to you that you yourself this very night, before a cock crows twice, shall 3 times deny me. You'd think that'd be the end of it, right? No more, but look what he said. But Peter, he can't let it go. He says insistently, even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. Insistently, meaning he's saying it over and over again. No, Jesus, not me. Judas, he's the one. You already said he's going to betray you. He's going to deny you too. And Andrew and those sons of Zebedee, they're all, they all wanted to be greater than everybody else. They're the ones that are going to deny you, but I will never do that. That's the heart of Peter. Sounds good, doesn't it? But guess what? He wasn't the only one saying it. Verse 31 says, and they all were saying the same thing too. They couldn't conceive that they could fail in this hour. Mathew 26, 69 through 74. And we see where this takes place, the 3 denials. You can see it in every one of the Gospels, but I've picked this one simply for one reason. It gives some interesting details. So the 3 denials, he said he would deny him 3 times and then the cock would crow. The first time, he's out there warming himself by the fire and everybody else is around there, and a servant girl comes up and says, hey, weren't you one of the ones with him? And it says that he says, no, I don't even know the man. Just a simple denial. I think I got through that one okay, And then he starts warming again. And then somebody else comes up there, a woman. Wait a second. I remember seeing you. You were one of the ones. And then it says he denies it with an oath. The second time it's with an oath. By God Almighty, I do not know the man. There was some kind of, I don't know what his oath was, but it was something. And then the third time somebody comes along and once again accuses him. And this time he denies with swearing and cursing. He got back, he channeled his old sailor self, and his sailor mouth came out. I tell you, blah, 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 I do not know the blankety blank man. And instantly, the cock crowed. And he remembered. Now, in Luke chapter 22, it's the only one that shows this part. And man, I just get chills when I think about this. Because the minute the cock crowed, it says that Jesus turned and looked at Peter. I'm going, how close was he to all this? He turns and looks, and it doesn't say that Peter looked at him, but I believe that he must have. I believe their eyes must have connected. When Jesus looked at Peter, and it says that Peter remembered, and he ran out and wept bitterly. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh, I failed him. I did it. I can't believe I denied him. I said I wouldn't. Oh, this is, I've blown everything. I've ruined everything. That's a failure. Turn with me to John chapter 21. We know what happens in the rest of the story. Jesus goes to the cross. He dies. He's buried. And he rises again. And on multiple occasions, he's seen by some of the followers of Jesus, people everywhere, his apostles. It says that it was the third time before this encounter happens that the apostles saw Jesus post-resurrection body. But here's the deal. In chapter 21, the apostles are all together, verses 1 and 2. They're all just standing around. Oh, what happens now? What happens next? In verse 3, Simon Peter says, well, I'm going fishing. I'm going fishing. What do you do when you feel like you've failed everything? You just go fishing. You go back to what you used to know. And so, as you follow this story, Peter's out there fishing. Some of the other apostles went with him, and Jesus comes walking along, kind of the way the story began, walking along the bank, and they're not catching anything. And Jesus says, hey, y'all throw that net on the other side. As soon as he does, so many fish, and John, so they can't contain it all. And John looks and says to Peter, it's the Lord. Peter says that he was stripped for fishing. Immediately he throws everything on and dives into the ocean or the sea. And all the others begin to paddle back in the smaller boat. And they're trying to bring in the fish. And Peter's swimming as fast as he can to the shoreline. And he gets there. And Jesus says, bring me some of those fish. So Peter goes over and he brings some fish over. And Jesus prepares it for them. And now the scene changes. And I just see them all sitting around going, wow, I can't believe it's you, Jesus. This is the third time, but you're here with us. And I wonder what Peter's thinking. I just kind of picture him kind of setting off a little off to the side, a little off to the edge, not quite in the center. And Jesus says this to him in verse 15. When they finish breakfast, Jesus says to Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Peter says, yes, Lord. You know that I love you. He said to him, tend my lambs. Now, before we go on any further, some of you may know this, some of you may not, but when Jesus asked Peter, Peter, do you love me? He's asking him, he's using the Greek word agape, which we know means sacrificial, lay down your life, put the other person first kind of love. And when Peter responds, yes, Lord, you know I love you, he's using a different Greek verb, phileo, Okay. So the noun or the verb. And it means you're my companion, your friendship kind of love, not necessarily sacrificial. So first time he goes through this, the second time he says, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Same question. The word for love there is agape. Peter says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Phileo. You're my friend. I value you. You're important. Can't bring himself to say agape. But he says, you said yes to me? Shepherd my sheep. Verse 17 says, he asked him one more time. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he had said to him the third time, do you love me? You know why Jesus asked him 3 times, do you love me? It's an interesting question. Do you love me, Peter? Goes back to maybe an opportunity to erase 3 denials. This third time when Jesus asked him, do you love me? He changes his word. It's not agape. It's phileo. Peter says, yes, Lord, you know I love you that way. You notice the change in Peter? Peter's not so boastful anymore. Yeah. Lord, you know I love you. Agape love, you bet. I got it for you. Come on. He had done that whole time. I will lay down my life. I will not deny you. I will not. We're called up to live by that Christian virtue of agape love, that self-sacrificial love. But sometimes we fail. A lot of times we fail. Peter failed massively, majorly. What is God doing? He's not even saying the words forgive, but he's extending forgiveness. Peter, yeah, you blew it. 3 times, actually many, many times you blew it. Do you love me? I love you. He's offering him forgiveness. What else is he offering him? A second chance? You ever felt like you've blown it? You just blew it. You blew it with God. God will never trust me again. I don't care what it is. There is nothing. You belong to him, and you blow it, and you come back, and Jesus says to each one of us, this is what he'll say to you. Do you love me? That's what he says to us. He doesn't have to come to us and say, Bo, you blew it, but I want you to know I love you. That was intrinsic to his words when he says, Bo, do you love me? The fact that Jesus would take the time to ask us after we've blown it, do you love me? That's a powerful, powerful thing. I hope that at this moment, if there's anything that you've wrestled with, you said, God can't forgive me for this one. God's not going to give me a second chance. God's not going to, this one's just too big. It's not bigger than this. One of the things I love about the Bible is every story in there, whatever the teaching is, there's always one that just is over the top. Job and his suffering. Jesus and the cross is an example for agape love. So we can never go, it's not possible. It's not possible to go through suffering. It's not possible to be forgiven. It's not possible for these things because we have all these incredible stories like this. And here's the one where God is saying to Peter, he is the God of second chances. Because look what he says. He doesn't just say, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Yes, I fall short of agape. I'm so sorry. I want to love you in that way, but I do love you. I have affection for you. I have feelings for you. I want to know you. I want to walk with you and love you in that way. And after the third time, Jesus asked Peter that. He asked him with that kind of love that seemed to be acceptable to him in this moment. But I want you to notice that every time he asked him if he loved him, and he said, yes, Lord, you know that I do, he gives him an instruction. Tend my lambs, shepherd my sheep, tend or care for my people is what he's talking about. So here's the question for us this morning. What is Jesus? Why is Jesus right now asking you the question, do you love me? Whatever that thing is. Why is he asking you that? Because he's inviting you back. And secondly, when you say, yes, Lord, you know I love you, what is he asking you to now go do? Tend his sheep? Care for this? Do that? It's not over. I still need you. I still want you. Let's stand. Just ask us to bow our heads for a moment. I just want you to hear me on this. Having people fill the front or not fill the front doesn't do anything for me in terms of like, oh, good. People were up here. It's successful. I don't care about that. What I really care about is that the opportunity to experience God's second chances. The opportunity to feel forgiven and accepted again. The opportunity to just encounter Jesus in this way and not walk out of here and leave that thing, that failure, still reigning in my life. So we're just going to take a few minutes. If you this morning want to just come up and you just want to kneel and say, Lord, right now, I know you're saying to me, do you love me? I want to answer that question, yes. And then, Lord, I want your other question. What is it you want me to get up and go do? And if you need prayer this morning, we're up here too. And in about 5 minutes, whatever's happening here or not happening, I'll release the rest of you. But we'll continue as we need to.